Hello, and in this Prepare for IELTS speaking video, I'm going to look at the Part 2 topic of describe a film you would like to share with your friends. You should say what it is, when and where you watched it, what it was about, and explain why you would like to share it. Now, often when I do topics like this, describe a group, describe a song, describe a book, I get a lot of complaints about my choices. It is very difficult to choose something that everybody has watched or everyone's favourite group because we all have different interests and different tastes. What you need to do is take the language, take the structure and use it for your film choice. I don't talk in great detail about the film itself. I talk about why I like it, what type of film it is, those kinds of things. So you just take those words and use them to talk about the film that you would like to share. So let's take a look at the model answer. It was quite tricky to decide what to talk about because I have such a heavy workload at the moment and don't watch films as much as I used to, and nothing immediately came to mind. And then I suddenly remembered the last film I watched was the only film that I would actually recommend, so I've decided to talk about that particular movie. I can't remember precisely when it was, because I have a terrible memory for dates, but it was a couple of months back, I think. Well, it must have been because it is a relatively recent film. The film is called Parasite, and it is a Korean film. I do know the name of the director, but his name escapes me at the moment. Anyway, when it first came out, it got rave reviews, and to be perfectly honest, that normally puts me off, because I don't tend to like what the critics like. I've never enjoyed any Oscar-winning movies. Despite this, I was intrigued by this film, and the protagonist is one of my favourite actors, so as soon as it came out, I went to the cinema to see it. It is incredibly tricky to define the genre of this film. It could be described as a thriller. No, that's too strong, because it's also a comedy. I guess you could say it's a tragicomedy or black comedy. I haven't got time to tell you the whole plot, and I don't want to give away any spoilers, but it is basically about social status, materialism and greed. The film switches from being hilarious to tragic, and it is incredibly thought-provoking. It makes you question things, and it is rare for a film to have such a profound effect on me. The set design is stunning, the cast give incredible performances, and the story is engaging, fast-moving, and I'm kind of lost for words. I found it enthralling, so I would definitely like to share it with my friends. So let's take a look at some of the language. If you've watched the previous videos, you will see that I'm using the same kind of language, so hopefully you're starting to build up your introduction to any Part 2 answer. I've added something here, a heavy workload. I think this is an incredibly useful phrase because it can describe why you haven't done something in a long time because you have such a heavy workload, and it's a great idiomatic expression meaning you have a lot of work. I've used used to in this to explain that I used to watch lots of films, but now because of my heavy workload I don't watch films as much as I used to. That particular movie, so in the title it said film, and so now I'm referring to it as a movie. It must have been, so when you're thinking about something but you're not certain, it must have been, because it is a relatively recent, it's a very useful adverb and it means quite recent film. I do know we use the auxiliary in front of the verb when we're emphasising, when we're stressing something. I do know the name of the director, the person who directed the film, but his name escapes me. Actually, I do know it, it's Bong Joon-ho, but I'm not going to say that because that's not important information in the IELTS exam. What is really important is your use of language, and by using it escapes me, his name escapes me, which means I can't remember it, This is very complex idiomatic language which will impress the IELTS examiner. Anyway is a word we use a lot in English when we're finishing one point and then going to start another one. Anyway, when it first came out, to come out is the phrasal verb that we use to describe the release of something, the publication of something. It got rave reviews. This is an adjective that we use quite informally and it means very good reviews, rave reviews. Put me off. If something puts you off, it means you lose interest in it or enthusiasm in it. And what I'm saying here is when critics are people who review films, and when they say this film is good, then usually I don't like it. I don't tend to like, and very good to use tend to because it means usually. I don't tend to like what the critics like, the reviewers, people who are paid to review films. Despite this, so I'm saying that yes, the critics said this and I don't usually like what the critics like, but despite this, so it's like saying however. I was intrigued by, so whatever film you're talking about, try to use this expression. And it's a very strong way of saying I was interested in it. I was intrigued by this film. The protagonist, this is the main character. It's very tricky in this film Parasite because there are quite a few main characters in it. But it doesn't matter to the IELTS examiner, they don't care who that is. The protagonist, the main character. Incredibly tricky, very difficult. To define the genre, to explain the genre. Genre is what we use when we talk about films, books, TV, and it means type. It's quite a tricky word to say, it's a French word, genre. It could be described as, so rather than just saying this film is a thriller, I'm making it much more complex. It's incredibly tricky to define the genre of this film. It could be described as a thriller, so this is a very scary, frightening film. But then I go on to say it's a tragicomedy. Comedy, so a funny film, but one that is also quite tragic, and tragic means very, very sad. So we put these two words together when it's a funny but sad film, and we call it a tragicomedy. Another way of saying this is a black comedy, but a black comedy just can be a very dark comedy, but tragicomedy means that there is something tragic that happens in it. Don't start telling the IELTS examiner the whole plot, because usually when you start talking about the plot is the storyline, you go into very basic language and you are more focused on the content rather than the language. And IELTS is a language exam. The IELTS exams are interested in what you have to say about the story. The plot, I don't want to give away any spoilers. Spoilers are what we use to talk about films, books, TV programs, and if somebody tells you what happens, this is called a spoiler. So you know what's going to happen before it happens. But it is basically, so I'm not saying the whole plot, but I'm saying it simply, basically, about social status. We talk about class in the UK, and so it's about the social status, working class, middle class, upper class, rich and poor. Materialism, this means wanting goods, wanting consumer items, so wanting a nice car, a nice house, those kind of things. And greed is when you want something in a negative way. You want to have everything and keep it to yourself and not share it with others. The film switches from, so it changes from being hilarious. Hilarious is a good word to describe something that's very, very funny. You can describe a person as hilarious as well. To tragic, to very, very sad. And it is incredibly thought-provoking. Something is thought-provoking, it makes you think. It's rare, not common, not usual. For a film to have such a profound effect on me. To have a profound effect is to have a deep effect. So whatever film you're talking about, think about these things. Think about the set design. And the set is where it is filmed. This film is filmed in a house. And so I'm thinking about the structure of the house and what we see in the film, the set design. It's stunning. It's amazing. The cast, well, these are the cast, and there are some more, and it means the actors, the group of actors as a whole. The story is engaging. If something's engaging, it keeps you interested. It's fast moving, so there's not a slow development of story and characters. You get straight to the action fairly quickly. I'm kind of lost for words. To be lost for words means to be surprised, confused, upset, when you can't think of what to say about something. I'm lost for words. And when we put in kind of, it is informal and it means rather to some extent. So I'm kind of lost for words. It's like saying I don't really know what else to say. I found it enthralling. If something's enthralling, it's fascinating, it's beguiling, it's captivating, it's enchanting. All of these words are much, much stronger than saying it was interesting, it was good. So try to use some complex adjectives when describing a film. So I've used a lot of language in here. So whatever film you're talking about, make sure you think about the genre. Make sure you think about the plot, but don't tell the whole story. And say, I don't want to give away any spoilers. Give away means to reveal any spoilers. Say what it is basically. Say what it is in one sentence, no more. And then does the film switch? Does it change from one thing to another? Even if it doesn't, the IELTS examiner doesn't care. Just add some switch in there. Talk about set design, talk about the cast, talk about the story, what it's like, engaging, fast moving, or is it slow moving? Maybe that's the kind of film you like. And then finish it with, I'm kind of lost for words because it was so amazing, enthralling, fascinating, beguiling. Remember, you can use lots of these words in a list. The IELTS examiner just needs to hear lots of complex vocabulary. They're not judging you on your film review. You are not a critic. Hope you found this video useful, and if you haven't watched Parasite, I strongly recommend that you do, because it is, like I said, an absolutely fascinating, captivating, enchanting, beguiling film.